Very much, Brock. We'll be checking back with you.
Brock and Lou, thank you so much. So, Lou, it looks like court is starting. Let's listen in.
Does the state have an additional witness?
Your Honor, the state of Minnesota rests.
Thank you. Mr. Nelson, are you ready to proceed? Call your first witness.
Your Honor, the defense calls Scott Creighton.
Your Honor, prior to the testimony, we request the cautionary.
Raise your right hand. You swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Have a seat. I have to delay just a little bit. Having trouble getting the computer to work, and there's something I have to read the jury, but you can be seated. All right. Hold on. Let me try and... My apologies.
Okay, Lou, so the state just rested the case, their case this morning right off the bat, and now we're going to the defense.
Yeah, and this Scott Creighton, I will have to listen in, but I think that he was the officer who responded in that 2019 incident involving George Floyd. So it could be that Eric Nelson is going straight to the 2019 incident in the body camera video that that the officer was wearing at the time. You know, like I said before, we don't have the witness lists presented to us. The sides know who's going to be called every day, but it's not like public information. So we're kind of like figuring it all out on the fly as we go. It sounds like that is the direction that they're going, though, right off the bat.
But it also sounds, Lou, if they're calling this witness first, well, let's talk about that later. It sounds like they're coming back.
Hold on. All right, let's have you give your first, middle, and last name and spell each of your names.
My name is Scott Robbie Creighton, C-R-E-I-G-H-T-O-N.
Members of the jury, you are about to hear evidence of an occurrence involving George Floyd on May 6th, 2019. This evidence is being admitted solely for the limited purpose of showing what effects the ingestion of opioids may or may not have had on the physical well-being of George Floyd. This evidence is not to be used as evidence of the character of George Floyd. Mr. Nelson.
Thank you. Mr. Creighton, by whom are you currently employed?
Your Honor, is there any way that we can, I could hear it a little louder? Could it be a little louder? I'm having a difficult head. Sorry about that, sir.
No problem, sir.
I just want to make sure I hear all the questions.
Is that better?
Yes, it is.
Okay. By whom are you currently employed?
Right now, I'm currently retired. I'm not employed by anybody.
Prior to your retirement, by whom were you employed?
The City of Minneapolis Police Department.
And how long did you work for the City of Minneapolis Police Department?
28 years.
Can you describe for the jury generally the various roles that you had for the Minneapolis Police Department?
Yes, I will. I started in 1993. I started on the street working as a 911 responder. I did 6 years as a 911 responder, and then I transferred over to public housing for approximately 9 months as public housing officer. And then from there I went to the 4th Precinct and became a community response team member, involved as a street level narcotics investigator. I did that for 22 years.
All right. Now, were you on duty on May 6th of 2019?
Yes, I was.
If you had an opportunity to review various police reports and body-worn cameras from an incident on that date?
Yes, I have.
On that date at approximately 4 or just before 5 o'clock p.m., did you execute a traffic stop of a red Ford Explorer?
Yes, I did.
And did you approach the passenger side?
Yes, I did.
Can you describe just very briefly the initial interaction that you had with the passenger of that vehicle?
I approached the vehicle on the passenger side. The passenger window was down. I started giving the individual that was in the passenger seat commands several times. The passenger was unresponsive and non-compliant to my commands. I then had to physically reach in because I wanted to see his hands, because I couldn't see his hands. I reached in finally and grabbed his hand to put it up on the dash, and then that individual was taken from the vehicle and handcuffed.
Okay. Did you make any observations as to the passenger's behavior?
Could you repeat that question, sir? I'm sorry.
Did you make any additional observations as to the passenger's behavior?
Yeah, in my mind, his behavior was very nervous, anxious.
I will withdraw that question. In terms of, did you see the passenger do anything physically with his hands?
Yes, he turned away from me towards the driver's seat as I was giving him commands to see his hands.
Did you draw your service weapon?
Yes, I did.
Did you observe the passenger put anything in his mouth?
Can you say that one more time, sir? I'm sorry.
Did you observe the passenger put anything in his mouth?
No, I didn't.
Were you wearing a body-worn camera issued by the city of Minneapolis on that day?
Yes, I was.
And have you had an opportunity to review your body-worn camera prior to today's testimony?
Yes, I have.
Your Honor, based upon the order, I would move to admit and publish Exhibit 1051.
All right. 1051 is received, subject to the motion in limine.
If we may publish.
What are you doing? Can you undo your seatbelt, sir? Sir, passenger, can you undo your seatbelt? Go ahead and undo your seatbelt.
Please, I don't want to get shot.
I don't plan on shooting you. I'm just saying, just take your time.
I ain't never seen him.
Okay, relax. Just undo your seatbelt. Let her take care of her guy. Just keep your hands out where I can see him.
Spit it out.
Hey!
I'm just playing with him. I'm just playing.
Let me... Put him on the dash.
Don't shoot me, sir. Please don't shoot me.
I'm not going to shoot you. Put your hands on the dash.
Okay.
Put your hands on the dash. The last time I'm going to tell you that. It's simple.
I got you.
He keeps moving his hands around.
Yes, sir.
He won't listen to what I have to say.
There you go right there. All right,
Put your hands on
Okay.
top of your head.
What y'all doing?
Put him on your head.
Top of your head.
Okay, man.
Open your mouth. Spit out what you got. Spit out what you got. I'm going to tase you. Spit it out. He's eating all
Don't you
kinds
jerk
of
away
stuff.
from me. No, that was one yellow pill.
Put your hands behind your
That was one yellow pill, boss.
Okay, now slowly come on out.
Damn, man.
Hand under
Now put your hand.
Hand under your
Ah,
hat.
man, underneath. I'm not gonna okay, relax then. I got beat up and everything before, man. You're not going to get beat up or nothing. You just follow what we're asking you to do. Tell her I apologize to her, man. I apologize, man. I apologize. Yeah.
Your Honor, maybe you have a sidebar.
So Lou, refresh my memory. Have we seen that video before?
We have, as in the reporters, I did a story on it back in last fall when it was initially brought up within this case. The jury has not seen it yet. And so the other part that the jury will be allowed to see is now much later, not much later. The part that they're not able to watch is that George Floyd gets arrested here, he gets put in the police car, he gets brought to the police station, and they begin to interview him. And then the jury will then see where it picks up when a first responder, an EMT or a paramedic comes in to take his blood pressure and talks to him about his high blood pressure and how he should go to the hospital. So I'm not sure exactly what the sidebar is about. There were discussions before court started concerning what portion of the video could be played.
Did you subsequently identify the driver of the passenger?
Yes, I did.
And who is that?
Mr. Floyd.
Your Honor, based on the court's ruling, I have no further questions for this witness.
Cross-examination.
Your Honor. Good morning, Officer Creighton.
Good morning.
You testified that you were the officer who approached the passenger side of the vehicle. You approached George Floyd on May 6th of 2019, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And you had your gun drawn when you approached Mr. Floyd, isn't that right?
Yes, I pulled it, yes.
And when you approached Mr. Floyd, he said, "Don't shoot me, man, I don't want to get shot," right?
Something like that, yes.
You told him to undo his seatbelt, correct?
That's correct, yes, ma'am.
And he did that, right?
Yes, he did.
And then you said, "Put your hands where I can see them," correct?
Yes.
And then he put his hands in the air?
Yes.
And then you told him to put his hands on the dash, is that right?
That's correct.
And that was when you grabbed his hand and forcibly put it on the dashboard of the vehicle, correct?
Fallen, yes.
And then the other officer with you on the other side of the vehicle changed that to put your hands on your head, correct?
That's correct.
And then he put his hands on his head, right?
That's correct, yes.
And there was one officer who said that they were going to tase him, right?
That's what I heard, yes.
And you were yelling pretty loud, correct?
Yes, I was, yes. It escalated real quick.
Some profanity as well, correct?
Yes.
And you had your gun drawn the whole time you were giving commands, right?
Once I started ordering him and he refused to show me his hands, yes, it escalated to where I pulled my gun, yes, ma'am.
And he was awake, correct?
What's that, ma'am?
Mr. Floyd was awake. Was he awake during this incident?
Yes.
He was conscious?
Yes.
He didn't appear to be in medical distress to you when you were pulling him out of the car, is that right? He was talking to you, he was standing up, is that right?
I don't know if it was specifically, sometimes he was talking, sometimes he was mumbling. He was incoherent in my mind a lot of the time during there.
But you got him out of the car and you handcuffed him, right?
That's correct, ma'am.
And he stood next to the car, right?
Yes, ma'am.
He asked you not to beat him up, correct?
That's correct, yes.
He was able to walk, right?
Yes, he was.
He continued to talk to you.
Yes.
Counsel Senator.
Okay, so I'm not positive what this sidebar is about, but there's a fine line that both sides need to walk to follow what is allowed to be used and what is allowed to be asked. And there may be a question of whether the door opens up for Eric Nelson to use more of that video and more from that incident, especially regarding what might have been going through George Floyd's mind, because that's what they're supposed to stay away from. And so I'm confident that Eric Nelson probably is going to use any opportunity he can to be able to use more from this 29 incident. So we'll see if that gets discussed at all. The prosecution focusing on how chaotic sounding the commands may have sounded to George Floyd, especially with the other officer threatening to use a taser, and also focusing on that he was standing up and was conscious.
Technology is not our friend today. Ms. Aldridge, if you would.
Thank you, Your Honor. Officer Creighton, you were describing that you got Mr. Floyd out of the car, correct?
Yes.
And he stood next to the car and you handcuffed him, correct?
Me and another officer had to physically handcuff him, yes.
And he didn't fall down, correct?
No, he didn't fall down.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Anything further?
Officer Creighton, there was another officer on the driver's side dealing with the driver,
Yes, that's correct, actually two.
and that officer was speaking to or giving commands to the driver
That's correct.
simultaneous to the time that you were giving commands to Mr. Floyd.
That's correct.
Did you hear the officer say, "Spit it out"?
I may have, yes. You'd have to see the video, and if that's what the video shows, then that's what occurred.
Okay. I have no further questions.
All right, anything further?
Your Honor. Officer Creighton, you were just asked some questions about what the other officers were doing. You were interacting with Mr. Floyd, correct?
Yes.
And while you were interacting with Mr. Floyd, he didn't collapse on the ground, correct?
Wait a minute. What was the question? Can you speak up a little louder, ma'am?
While you were interacting with Mr. Floyd, he didn't collapse on the ground, correct?
No, he did not.
Well, the answer is stricken. The objection is sustained.
You were asked some questions about what the other officers were doing, correct?
That's correct.
Your attention was focused on Mr. Floyd, correct?
Yes, it was.
And Mr. Floyd didn't drop dead while you were interacting with him, correct?
No.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Anything further? No, Your Honor. Thank you. You may step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, at this time, the defense calls Michelle Mosing.